I thought I knew my family very well, but when I picked up my phone, secrets darker than I could have ever imagined were revealed. Every photo, every message, every secret file pulled me deeper into an unexpected nightmare. And when I finally realized what they were planning, it was almost too late. Before I start the story, I want to get to know you too. Write the flag colors of the country you're watching from, and I'll try to guess. Who knows, maybe we're neighbors. My name is Marjorie, though everyone calls me Mara. I'm 65 years old, and until 3 days ago, I believed I had a perfectly normal life. I live in a comfortable home in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my husband Ernest, who's 67. We've both been retired for a few years now. I was a history teacher for 30 years, and he was an engineer. We have one son, Jordan, who's been married for 5 years to Celeste. Our daughter-in-law always seemed like a charming young woman to me. She had a degree in business administration, was intelligent, beautiful, and worked for a financial consulting firm. Jordan met her at a mutual friend's party, and they married within a year. Sometimes I thought she was a bit distant, but I attributed that to work stress and her more reserved personality. It all started last Wednesday when Celeste came to visit us alone, which was unusual since she and Jordan normally came together on weekends. She arrived looking agitated, saying she had a problem with her phone. The screen was completely shattered, and she asked if I knew any reliable place to get it fixed. I broke my phone by accident and need it working today for an important meeting tomorrow. Jordan's traveling, and I have no idea where to take it, she explained. By coincidence, I had taken my own phone to be repaired the week before at a small shop on Beatty's Ford Road. The owner, Darius, whom everyone called by his first name, was the son of a former colleague from the school where I taught. I offered to take her phone to him. That would be perfect, Mara. You'd be saving my life, said Celeste, handing me the phone. The password is 2800218, our wedding anniversary. I have to rush to the office now. Can I pick it up tonight? I agreed. Of course. I took the phone and drove to Darius's shop. The place was small, squeezed between a pharmacy and a bakery, with a discreet sign reading, Express Repairs. When I entered, Darius was bent over a table full of tiny tools and disassembled electronic devices. Mrs. Whitfield, so good to see you again, he greeted me with a smile. I explained about my daughter-in-law's phone, and he assured me he could fix it within a few hours. I'll be back after lunch, I said, handing him the device and the password. I spent the afternoon shopping, and around 4 p.m. I returned to the shop. Darius was alone, and when he saw me enter, his expression changed. The friendly look gave way to something I couldn't decipher at the moment. Worry. Fear. Mrs. Whitfield, he said in a low voice, glancing quickly toward the door as if checking that no one else was there. The phone is ready, but I need to show you something, ma'am. I frowned, confused. Some problem with the device? No, not with the device, he replied. Then he moved closer, speaking almost in a whisper. Cancel your credit cards, change your passwords, and get out immediately. I felt a chill run down my spine. What? What are you talking about, Darius? He gestured for me to come closer, opened Celeste's phone, and entered the messaging app. He navigated to a folder called Plan B and showed me the screen. My blood froze. They were messages exchanged between Celeste and my son, detailing a plan to kill me. Mom's getting more forgetful, said one message from Jordan. This is the perfect time. The doctor is already documenting her memory lapses at my request. No one's going to question it when it happens. Celeste's response made my stomach turn. Her and your father's life insurance is worth almost $2 million. With the house sale afterward, we'll have enough to start fresh far from Charlotte. I felt my legs give way and had to lean on the counter. This can't be true, I murmured, more to myself than to Darius. Mrs. Whitfield, I swear I didn't want to get involved. When I was testing the phone after the repair, a notification popped up, and I accidentally saw these messages. I couldn't ignore it. I kept scrolling through the conversation with my eyes wide with horror. They discussed methods, dates, how to make it look like a domestic accident. They talked about medications they could use, doses that would be fatal for a woman my age with high blood pressure. My own son and his wife coldly planning my death. They're also planning to kill Ernest, I whispered, feeling breathless. The conversation detailed how they would eliminate my husband afterward. It has to be a few weeks apart, Jordan wrote. An elderly couple dying at the same time would raise suspicions. Darius closed the shop door and turned the sign to closed. He brought me a glass of water and helped me sit down. You have to go to the police, he said with a firm but gentle voice. I shook my head, still in shock. They won't believe me. It's the word of a forgetful old woman against my son and daughter-in-law, respectable people in the community. Then, ma'am, you have to gather evidence and you have to protect yourself. He was right. I took the phone with trembling hands and began taking photos of the messages with my own device. I documented everything, dates, times, the detailed plan, mentions of the family doctor who was apparently being manipulated to create a history of dementia. Darius, could you restore the phone exactly as it was? I don't want them to know we discovered anything. He agreed, and we worked together for another hour. When we finished, Celeste's phone looked intact, with no sign that her secret messages had been discovered. Leaving the shop, I felt like I was in a nightmare. The gray Charlotte sky seemed even more ominous. How would I go back home? How would I look at Ernest knowing that our only son was planning to kill us? Worse yet, how would I face Celeste when she came to pick up the phone? Driving back home, I planned each step. First, I had to alert Ernest without scaring him too much. Then we had to act quickly, but intelligently. If Jordan and Celeste suspected we knew something, they might accelerate their plans or create a new strategy. The weight of betrayal was almost unbearable. My son, whom I carried in my womb, whom I breastfed, whom I helped with homework, whom I consoled when his first relationship ended. He was planning my death for money. I parked the car in front of our house and took several deep breaths. I had to stay calm. The life and death game had begun, and I had to be smarter than the two young people who thought a forgetful old woman would be easy prey. Little did they know that this lady had faced the civil rights movement as a student, had raised a son alone while her husband traveled for work, had survived breast cancer 5 years ago. If they thought I was going to fall without a fight, they were very wrong. I got out of the car holding Celeste's phone like it was a bomb about to explode. I entered the house where my life would never be the same again. Ernest was in the living room watching the news, as he did every afternoon. His familiar face, with gray hair and reading glasses on the tip of his nose, gave me an instant of normalcy amid the chaos that had settled into my life. "Were you able to fix Celeste's phone?" he asked distractedly without taking his eyes off the television. I swallowed hard. "Yes, it's fixed. I had to tell him, but I didn't know how to begin. How do you tell your husband of 40 years that your only son wants both of you dead?" "Ernest," I called, my voice firmer than I expected. "I need to show you something. It's serious." Something in my tone must have alarmed him because he immediately turned off the television and looked at me attentively. "What happened, Mara?" I sat beside him and showed him the photos I had taken of the messages. I watched his face as he read, initial confusion, followed by disbelief, then horror, and finally a pain so deep I thought he would collapse right there. "No," he whispered with a choked voice. "There must be some mistake. Jordan would never—" "I didn't want to believe it either," I replied, holding his trembling hands. "But it's them, Ernest. It's Jordan's number, it's the way he writes. And Celeste responding from her phone, which is here with me." Ernest closed his eyes, breathed deeply several times. When he opened them again, I saw something I rarely witnessed: absolute determination. "What are we going to do?" he asked. I explained my initial plan: document everything, check our bank accounts, change passwords, cancel shared credit cards, investigate which doctor might be involved in this. We had to act as if nothing had changed, while secretly gathering enough evidence to confront them, or, if necessary, take everything to the police. "Celeste is coming to pick up the phone tonight," I warned. "We have to act normally." "How?" Ernest's voice faltered. "How am I going to look at her knowing that—" "The same way I've taught teenagers to fake interest in medieval history for 30 years, I tried to joke, but the smile came out weak. "One step at a time, Ernest. Our lives depend on it. We spent the next hour reviewing online bank accounts. We discovered something disturbing. Small amounts had been regularly transferred from our joint account to an unknown account over the last 3 months. Amounts low enough not to raise suspicions. $200 here, $300 there, but totaling almost $10,000. Jordan has access to our accounts, Ernest murmured. We gave him power of attorney last year, remember? In case something happened to us. The irony was bitter. We trusted him so much that we practically handed him the tools for our own destruction. We changed all passwords, canceled 2 credit cards that Jordan had as additional users, and called the bank requesting a block on any transaction over $1,000 without our physical authorization. And what about the doctor? Ernest asked. Dr. Harold Benton had been treating us for over 15 years. He was a friend. He occasionally had lunch at our house. The idea that he could be falsifying medical reports at my son's request was almost as painful as Jordan's betrayal. I'm going to schedule an appointment tomorrow, I decided. Alone. I want to see what he says about my memory. At 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Ernest and I looked at each other tensely. He squeezed my hand, a silent promise that we would follow our plan. I opened the door, forcing a smile. Celeste looked beautiful as always, with her brown hair impeccably styled and elegant clothes. That carefully maintained appearance now seemed like a perfect mask to hide the monstrosity beneath. Mara, sorry for coming so late. How did it go with the technician? Everything went fine, I replied, handing her the phone. Darius did excellent work. The screen is like new. She turned on the device, quickly checked it, and smiled. Perfect. How much was it? Let me pay you. Don't worry. I already took care of everything. He didn't even charge because I'm an old customer. Celeste hesitated for a moment, a slight frown that I wouldn't have noticed before. She was probably worried that the technician had seen something. Are you sure? I don't want to be a bother. Of course not, dear. Would you like to come in? Ernest is watching TV. We were about to have some sweet tea. Oh, I can't today. I have a presentation tomorrow morning and still need to review some data. I noticed how she avoided looking directly at me while speaking. A skilled liar, but now that I knew what to look for, the small signs were there. I understand. When does Jordan get back from his trip? Tomorrow night, she replied quickly. Another lie. From the messages, Jordan wasn't traveling. He was at home waiting for news from her. Tell him to visit us soon, I said, maintaining a casual tone. It's been almost 2 weeks since we've seen him. Of course. She smiled, putting the phone in her purse. He misses you too. Oh, I remembered something. Have you checked out that Dr. Jordan recommended? The memory specialist? My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. We still haven't had time. Why do you ask? She hesitated, her face a mask of feigned concern. Jordan mentioned that lately you've been forgetting some important things. Names, appointments. It's his impression. I responded with a light laugh. My memory is excellent. I remember even the day you wore that same outfit at my cousin Elisa's birthday party 2 months ago. I saw something flash quickly through her eyes. Frustration, worry, before her social smile returned. Well, anyway, it never hurts to get a checkup, right? At your age. Of course. I'll schedule an appointment soon. We said our goodbyes, and as soon as I closed the door, I leaned against it, exhausted from the effort of pretending normalcy. Ernest was waiting for me in the living room, tense. So? She tried to plant the idea of my memory loss, I replied, sitting beside him. They're building the scenario for when it happens. What do we do now? Act, I replied, determination growing inside me. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to Dr. Benton. Then I want to check our life insurance. We need to know exactly what Jordan altered. And then... I paused. Then we're going to set our own trap. That night, I could barely sleep. Every noise in the house seemed like a threat. I got up 3 times to check if the doors were locked. On one of those times, I found Ernest in the kitchen drinking water with the same tormented look I must have had. I'm thinking about Jordan as a child, he said quietly. Do you remember how he was afraid of the dark? How he ran to our bed during storms? What happened to that boy, Mara? I had no answer. How our loving son had transformed into that calculating stranger capable of coldly planning our death. We're going to find out, I promised, hugging him. And we're going to survive this. The next morning, I called Dr. Benton's office claiming an emergency. I got an appointment for 10 a.m. Before leaving, we checked all our accounts online again and discovered something even more disturbing. There was a new life insurance policy in my name contracted 3 months ago, which I had no knowledge of. How is this possible? I asked, horrified. Ernest navigated through the digitized documents. Look, the signature is yours. I approached the screen, incredulous. The signature really looked like mine, but I had never signed that document. They forged my signature, I murmured. And there's more. Look at the value, 1.5 million. And the only beneficiary is Jordan, Ernest completed, his voice broken. The reality of the situation finally hit me with full force. It wasn't just a vague plan. They had already taken concrete steps. Documents had been forged, money was being diverted, a doctor was possibly involved, and now a life insurance policy I knew nothing about, ready to be collected after my accidental death. I left the house feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The consultation with Dr. Benton would be crucial. I needed to discover to what extent he was involved in this conspiracy. The office was quiet at that hour of morning. The receptionist, who had known me for years, smiled when she saw me. Mrs. Whitfield, so good to see you. The doctor will see you shortly. Less than 10 minutes later, I was called in. Dr. Benton, a middle-aged man with gray hair and a generally friendly expression, seemed slightly uncomfortable when I entered. Mara, what a surprise. Jordan called me yesterday. He said you were reluctant to get tests done. I kept my expression neutral while sitting down. Really? How strange that he'd say that. Actually, doctor, I came because I'm worried about my memory. The doctor nodded as if confirming something he already knew. Yes, Jordan mentioned some worrying episodes. Forgetfulness, confusion. Curious, I replied calmly, because I don't remember having any problems like that. Dr. Benton hesitated for a moment. Well, Mara, sometimes the patient doesn't perceive their own lapses. It's common in initial dementia cases. And you already have a diagnosis, apparently. He seemed increasingly uncomfortable. No, of course not, but Jordan showed me some videos, you confusing dates, forgetting names of close people. Videos? I asked, genuinely surprised. May I see them? He didn't leave me copies, but... Dr. Benton, I interrupted, leaning forward. You've been my doctor for 15 years. Do you know me? Do you really believe I have dementia, or are you just believing what my son says? The silence that followed was revealing. Finally, he sighed. Mara, Jordan came to see me several times in recent months, very worried. He said you and Ernest were losing the ability to take care of yourselves, that you needed supervision. He asked me to document any signs of cognitive decline, and I agreed. He had the decency to look ashamed. I only noted what he reported. I didn't diagnose anything without tests. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Dr. Benton, my son is planning to kill me and Ernest. The shock on his face seemed genuine. What? Mara, that's a very serious accusation. I have proof. And now I understand why he needed your involvement, even if indirect. A medical history documenting cognitive decline would make my death much less suspicious. Dr. Benton visibly paled. His hands, normally steady, trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses. Mara, I would never ever participate in something like that. I believed Jordan was genuinely concerned about you. I took out my phone and showed him some of the photos I had taken of the messages. As he read, his face went from disbelief to horror. "My God," he finally murmured. "I had no idea." "I want to see my medical record," I demanded. "Now." He hesitated only a moment before accessing his computer and opening my medical file. He turned the screen so I could read. There it was, documented in impersonal clinical language. Patient presents signs of cognitive decline as reported by Sun. Recurring episodes of confusion, temporal and spatial disorientation, forgetting names and recent events. Complete neurological evaluation recommended. "This is a lie," I said with a firm voice. "And you know it. Mara, I only recorded what Jordan reported. I didn't confirm or diagnose anything, but you created a record that could be used against me. An official medical record suggesting I'm losing my mental faculties. Perfect for when I died accidentally, don't you think?" The doctor seemed truly disturbed. "What do you want me to do?" "First, print this record for me with your signature. Then, I want you to make a new entry dated today, stating that you personally evaluated me and found no signs of cognitive impairment." He agreed immediately, clearly affected by the situation. "And doctor," I added as he typed, "if anything happens to Ernest or me, this record and our conversation today will be the first things the police see." I left the office with the documents in hand, concrete proof of the conspiracy against us. Dr. Benton had been manipulated by Jordan, but his complicity, even through naivety, had almost cost us our lives. I drove to the bank next. I needed to personally verify our accounts and mainly revoke any power of attorney we had given Jordan. The manager, Mr. Mauricio, who had handled our accounts for years, was visibly surprised when I requested to revoke the power. "Mrs. Whitfield, are you sure? Your son approached me recently saying you both would like to expand his powers to handle finances, since Mr. Ernest isn't doing well health-wise." Another lie. Ernest was perfectly healthy for his 67 years. "My husband is very well, Mr. Mauricio, and yes, I'm absolutely sure. In fact, I want to verify all movements in our accounts for the past 6 months." We spent the next hour reviewing statements. Besides the small transfers we had already identified online, we discovered something even more disturbing. Jordan had initiated the process to obtain a second credit card for Ernest, claiming the original was lost. He said Mr. Ernest had lost the card but didn't want to bother him with the bureaucracy, the manager explained, clearly embarrassed now. "And you issued a new card without the presence or signature of the cardholder?" I asked, incredulous. "Well," Mr. Mauricio shifted uncomfortably in his chair, "since he had power of attorney and already handled various financial matters for you both." I took a deep breath, containing my rage. "Cancel that card immediately and block any future attempt at issuance without our physical presence." When I left the bank, I felt simultaneously relieved to have interrupted another aspect of the plan and terrified by the extent of the plot. Jordan had meticulously prepared the groundwork, creating a scenario where our death would seem natural and he would have total control over our assets. On the way home, my phone rang. It was him. My heart raced, but I answered with the most normal voice possible. "Hello, son. Mom, is everything okay? I just got back from my trip, and Celeste told me you took her phone to be repaired." That was very kind of you. The naturalness with which he lied was impressive. There had been no trip whatsoever. It was nothing, dear. "The repair guy is the son of a colleague of mine. He gave us a good price. That's great. Listen, I was thinking of coming over tonight with Celeste. It's been a while since we had dinner together, hasn't it?" A chill ran down my spine. Why this sudden interest in visiting us? Had they noticed something? Had the doctor called Jordan after my visit? "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Come over. I'll make that lasagna you like." "Perfect. Oh, and Mom, did you go to that doctor I recommended? The memory specialist? Celeste said you still hadn't gone." "Actually, I went to Dr. Benton this morning." A brief silence. "You went? And what did he say?" "Nothing out of the ordinary. He did some simple tests. Said I'm perfectly fine for my age." Another silence, Longer this time. Ah, well, that's good then. But maybe it would be good to get a second opinion, you know? Sometimes Dr. Benton is very conservative with diagnoses. We'll see, son. So we'll see each other tonight then? Yes, around 7 p.m. See you later. When I hung up, my hands were trembling. The apparently innocent conversation was loaded with threatening subtexts. Jordan clearly expected Dr. Benton to have declared me with some type of cognitive impairment and was destabilized when he learned that wasn't the case. And now he wanted to have dinner with us tonight. Why? To observe my behavior, to verify if I showed any suspicion or something worse. I arrived home and found Ernest in the living room surrounded by papers. He looked up anxiously. How did it go? Is the doctor involved? I explained everything. How Jordan had manipulated Dr. Benton to create a false medical history. How he had gained access to our bank accounts. How he forged life insurance documents. And he just called me, I concluded. He and Celeste want to have dinner here tonight. Ernest paled. Do you think they suspect we discovered something? I'm not sure, but he was clearly disturbed when he learned I went to Dr. Benton and that the doctor found nothing wrong with me. We looked at each other, the same silent question floating between us. What might Jordan and Celeste try during that dinner? We can't eat or drink anything they bring, Ernest said finally. And one of us must always be alert, watching what they do. I agreed. We need to record that dinner somehow. If they say something incriminating... Ernest nodded and went to get his old digital recorder that he used to record meetings when he still worked. We tested the device, checking if it still worked and where we could hide it in the dining room. I spent the afternoon preparing the lasagna I had promised. Though the idea of sitting at the table with two people who were planning to kill us made me physically ill. Every time I thought about the messages, about the calculating coldness with which our own son discussed our death, I felt a pain that no words could describe. How did we get to this point? I asked Ernest as we set the table for dinner. What did we do wrong with him? Ernest shook his head, his eyes showing the same pain I felt. I don't know, Mara. I thought we knew our son. At exactly 7 p.m. the doorbell rang. Ernest and I exchanged one last confirming glance. The recorder was hidden under the table, functioning. Our strategy was simple. Act naturally, observe every movement they made, and if possible, provoke some slip that we could document. I opened the door with a rehearsed smile. Jordan and Celeste were there, he holding a bottle of red wine and she carrying a box of chocolates that they knew were my favorites. "Mom!" exclaimed Jordan, hugging me enthusiastically. The physical contact that once gave me comfort now sent chills down my spine. How could he embrace me knowing he was planning to kill me? "How wonderful to see you," he continued, handing me the bottle. "We brought a special wine for today." "Oh, thank you, dear," I replied, discreetly analyzing the label. It was an expensive vintage, one that would normally impress me. Now it only made me wonder if it was adulterated. Ernest received them in the living room, his smile as forced as mine. I offered them water, coffee, or juice, anything except the wine they brought. "Not yet, Mom," said Jordan, settling comfortably on the sofa. "Let's save the wine to go with dinner." We talked about trivial things for almost half an hour. Their work, the weather, local news. The surreal normalcy of the situation made me nauseous. I watched how Jordan occasionally exchanged glances with Celeste, how she was attentive to every movement I made, how he directed apparently innocent questions about my routine, my medications, my recent difficulties. "So, Mom," he said finally, leaning forward, "how exactly was the consultation with Dr. Benton today? Did he do tests, order any specific exams?" I kept my expression neutral. "It was a normal consultation. He didn't see anything concerning?" "Strange," Jordan murmured, frowning. "He had told me he suspected something more serious. Maybe early Alzheimer's." "Really?" I asked, raising my eyebrows in false surprise. "When did he tell you that?" Jordan realized his slip. Last week when I called him to talk about those episodes I noticed." "What episodes would those be, son?" "I don't remember having any problems." A condescending smile appeared on his face. "See, that's exactly what worries us. Don't you remember? Last week you forgot Mrs. Irasima's name, our neighbor of 20 years. Then you left the stove on for hours. None of that had happened. These were fabricated lies to build the narrative of my supposed dementia. Curious, I replied calmly. I spoke with Mrs. Irasima just yesterday, calling her by name, and I haven't used the stove in days. I've preferred the microwave lately. Jordan's smile faltered for an instant. Let's eat, Ernest intervened, standing up. Mara's lasagna smells wonderful. At the table, the theater continued. I served the lasagna while Ernest discreetly switched the wine glasses. We had agreed. We would take the wine they brought, pretend to serve ourselves, but actually drink from another bottle we had left previously open in the kitchen. A toast, proposed Jordan, raising his glass, to family and health. We raised our glasses and pretended to drink. I watched attentively when Jordan and Celeste took their own sips. They drank normally, without hesitation. Maybe the wine wasn't adulterated after all. Mara, said Celeste, putting her glass on the table, Jordan and I have been talking. We're worried about you two living alone in this big house. It's true, added Jordan, especially considering these recent episodes. We think maybe it would be better if you moved to a smaller place, easier to maintain. Or maybe we could come live here with you for a while. I felt Ernest tense beside me. That was it. They wanted to move into our house, be closer to execute their plan. How kind of you, I replied, keeping my voice firm. But we're perfectly fine, aren't we, Ernest? Absolutely, he agreed. In fact, we're even thinking of traveling soon, maybe spend some time on the coast, in Myrtle Beach. I saw Jordan and Celeste exchange a quick glance. Travel? Now? Questioned Jordan. I don't think that's a good idea, Dad. What about Mom's doctors and your routine checkups? Everything's excellent, I replied for Ernest. We can travel peacefully, Celeste smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Do you need help planning this trip? I could look for hotels, packages. That won't be necessary, I cut her off. We've already taken care of everything. The dinner continued with that underlying tension. In every apparently innocent question, I recognized the true intention behind it. They were evaluating our mental state, trying to establish control, looking for ways to get physically closer to us. When I served dessert, a flan I made carefully in front of Ernest, Jordan returned to the subject. I was talking to a lawyer, he said casually, about broader powers. You know how it is, for emergencies. What kind of emergencies? Ernest asked, his voice controlled. Well, if one of you needs to be hospitalized, or if, things get worse with Mom's memory. The lawyer suggested a full power of attorney that would give me authority to make medical and financial decisions for you both. I looked at my son, studying his face, that same face I had kissed as a baby, comforted as a child, photographed proudly at his graduation. How had it transformed into the mask of a calculating stranger? That won't be necessary, son, I said finally. We've already updated all our documents recently. We even made some changes to our will and insurance beneficiaries. Jordan's expression froze for an instant. Changes? What kind of changes? Nothing major, just making sure everything's in order in case something happens to us. Celeste put her hand on Jordan's arm as if restraining him. It's always good to review those documents, she said softly. Did you consult a lawyer? Dr. Mauricio, the one you recommended, Ernest lied with impressive naturalness. There was no Dr. Mauricio, but the lie achieved its objective. Both seemed momentarily destabilized. At 10:00 p.m., Jordan looked at his watch and announced they had to leave. I have to work early tomorrow, he justified. But I knew the real reason. They needed to recalculate their plans. After many false embraces and empty promises to visit us more often, they finally left. As soon as the door closed, Ernest and I collapsed on the sofa, physically exhausted from the effort of maintaining appearances. They're suspicious, Ernest whispered. They realize something changed, I agreed, getting up to retrieve the recorder. We rewound the recording, listening to the entire conversation again. The implications were clear. Jordan and Celeste were still determined to proceed with the plan. But our recent moves, the medical consultation, banking changes, the mention of the will, had made them cautious. They're going to try something soon, Ernest said. They can't wait much longer now that we've started taking protective measures. We need more concrete evidence, I said. The recording helps, but it's still not enough for the police. What if we tried to get them to confess, confront them directly? I shook my head. Too risky. They'd deny everything and become more vigilant. That night we checked all the locks 3 times before going to bed. Still, I slept with a phone beside the bed and a chair propped against the bedroom door. Precautions I never imagined needing to take against my own son. The next morning, I woke startled by the sound of a car parking. I ran to the window and saw Celeste getting out of her black SUV alone at 8 a.m. on a weekday when she should be at work. "Ernest," I called urgently. "Celeste is here." He got up quickly, still groggy. "Alone? Where's Jordan?" "I don't know. I'm going to answer, but stay close." I went downstairs, trying to control my breathing. Why would Celeste come so early without warning? What did she want? I opened the door even before she rang the bell. Her face registered surprise for a moment, quickly replaced by a rehearsed smile. "Mara, sorry for coming so early. I was passing by on my way to work and thought I'd drop off these documents that Jordan separated for you." She held a yellow folder. "What documents?" I asked without trying to take it. "About that power of attorney. We discussed yesterday, and some articles about treatments for early Alzheimer's that might help delay disease progression." She extended the folder again. "Jordan is really worried about you." I looked at the folder for a long moment. It was a trap. It had to be. Maybe documents already prepared with my forged signature, like the life insurance we discovered. "Why don't you come in?" I invited, maintaining my casual tone. "We can have some coffee and look at it together." Celeste hesitated visibly. "Actually, I'm running late for work. I just wanted to leave this for you to read calmly." "I insist," I said, opening the door wider. "Ernest just made fresh coffee. It'll only take 5 minutes." Reluctantly, she entered. I led her to the kitchen, where Ernest was already there, appearing calm while drinking his coffee. "Celeste, what a pleasant surprise," he said. "She brought some documents for us to sign," I explained, emphasizing the word sign. Ernest understood immediately. "How nice," he responded. "Let's take a look." Celeste seemed increasingly uncomfortable as Ernest took the folder and began examining the documents. I watched her attentively, noting how her eyes followed his every movement, how her fingers drummed nervously on the table. "Interesting," Ernest murmured after a few minutes. "This power of attorney would give Jordan total control over our finances and medical decisions. It would practically make us legally incompetent." "It's just a precaution," Celeste justified quickly. "Considering Mara's condition." "What condition would that be exactly?" I asked directly. "Well, the memory lapses, the confusion." She hesitated, apparently realizing she was on dangerous ground. "Jordan noticed several episodes." "Curious," I commented. "Dr. Benton didn't find any of that yesterday." "Doctors can be wrong," she replied, recovering her composure. "That's why a second opinion with a specialist is important." Ernest put the documents back in the folder and pushed it toward Celeste. "We appreciate the concern, but we won't be signing this. In fact, we've already started procedures to revoke the limited power we gave Jordan last year." The shock on her face was genuine and momentary, quickly replaced by an expression of studied concern. "But why? Jordan only wants to help." "We're sure he does," I replied, "but we prefer to maintain control of our own lives." Celeste stood up abruptly. "I have to go. I'm really late." "Of course," I said, accompanying her to the door. "Tell Jordan we'll call later to talk about these documents." As soon as she left, Ernest and I looked at each other, the same obvious conclusion for both of us. "They're accelerating the plan," he whispered. "Yes," I nodded, "and that means we have to act now." After Celeste left, Ernest and I carefully examined the documents she had brought. As we suspected, The power of attorney would give Jordan absolute powers over our finances, properties, and medical decisions. There was also a voluntary admission form for a rest clinic, actually an institution for elderly people with severe dementia, with spaces for our signatures. "They're not even trying to hide it anymore," Ernest murmured, his fingers trembling as he flipped through the papers. "They're practically asking us to sign our own death sentence." "That's good," I replied, surprising him. "The more explicit they are, the more evidence we'll have." I spent the morning photographing each document, creating digital copies that I sent to Loretta's email, my longtime friend and the only person outside our house I completely trusted. I briefly explained the situation and asked her to keep the files safe without talking to anyone about it. "What do we do now?" Ernest asked when I finished. "We need a plan. They're clearly moving forward. Celeste's surprise visit, these documents. We can't wait any longer." We decided it was time to seek professional help. Not the police. We still didn't have enough definitive evidence, but a lawyer who could guide us on how to legally protect our assets and, more importantly, our lives. We chose a lawyer we hadn't known previously and who had no connection to Jordan. Attorney Nia Jefferson, specialist in family and criminal law. We managed to schedule a consultation for that same afternoon. In her elegant downtown office, we explained the entire situation to Attorney Jefferson. The discovered messages, the bank accounts, the fraudulent life insurance, the manipulated medical records, the documents Celeste had brought that morning. The lawyer listened attentively, taking occasional notes and asking for specific details. When we finished, she took a deep breath before speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing an extremely grave situation. What you've described constitutes various crimes: conspiracy, document forgery, attempted fraud, and more seriously, conspiracy to commit homicide." "Do we have enough evidence for the police?" Ernest asked. "The messages are the most compelling evidence, but since you obtained them by accessing Celeste's phone without her authorization, there's a risk they might be considered illicit evidence. However, considering the gravity of the situation and the imminent danger to you both, I believe we can build a solid case." "What should we do first?" I asked. "Immediately, we're going to prepare legal documents revoking any existing power of attorney and blocking the possibility of new powers without the presence of an independent lawyer. I myself can serve as a witness to your mental capacity. Then we're going to file a detailed complaint presenting all the evidence we have so far." We spent the next 2 hours signing documents, formalizing statements, and planning each step. Attorney Jefferson was thorough, ensuring every legal aspect was covered. "Now," she said finally, "let's address the most urgent issue, your physical safety. I strongly suggest you don't go home today." Ernest and I exchanged alarmed glances. "Do you think we're in immediate danger?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Based on what you've told me, yes. They've realized you're taking protective measures. Celeste's surprise visit this morning suggests urgency on their part. If I were you, I'd spend a few days in a hotel under a different name until we can get a protection order." We left the lawyer's office with a folder full of documents and a sense of urgency. We went directly to the police station, where we filed a detailed complaint. The duty sergeant, a middle-aged man named Leon Matthews, listened to our story with growing concern. "This is extremely serious," he commented after examining the evidence. "I'm going to assign an investigator to the case immediately and request discreet surveillance for your residence." When we mentioned that the lawyer had suggested not returning home, the sergeant agreed emphatically. "In fact, it would be safer for you to stay elsewhere for now. But first, I'd like to send a team to install discreet cameras in your house with your consent. If they try to enter or do anything, we'll have concrete evidence." We agreed to the plan. We would return briefly home, only to collect some essential belongings while the police installed surveillance equipment at strategic points. Then, we would go to a hotel downtown, away from our neighborhood, using false names as suggested. During the taxi ride back, Ernest remained silent, staring out the window. When we were almost there, he finally spoke. "I never imagined the day would come when I'd be afraid of my own son." I squeezed his hand. There were no words that could ease that pain. Our house, seen from outside, looked strangely normal. The same windows, the same garden we'd cultivated for years, the same mailbox that Jordan had painted as a teenager. It was hard to believe that this place, which represented security and family, had become the scene of a conspiracy against our lives. The plainclothes police arrived discreetly in an unmarked car. They entered through the back door and worked quickly, installing small cameras in strategic locations: living room, kitchen, hallways, entrances. They explained that the images would be transmitted directly to the station and monitored 24 hours a day. Meanwhile, Ernest and I collected essentials: clothes for a few days, medications, important documents. I avoided looking at the family photographs on the walls, the objects that told the story of our life together. Every memory was now contaminated by betrayal. "We're ready," announced the officer in charge of the installation. "The cameras are practically invisible to the naked eye, but capture everything in high definition. If anyone enters, we'll know." He handed us a small card with a phone number. "This is a direct line to our team. Any emergency, call immediately." When we were about to leave, my phone rang. It was Jordan. I looked at the officer, who nodded, indicating I should answer normally. "Hello?" I replied, trying to sound natural. "Mom, where are you? I stopped by your house and nobody answered." My heart raced. He had gone to our house while we were out. "Why?" "We're shopping at the mall," I lied. "We needed some things." "Ah, I see. I got worried. You never go out without letting us know." The falseness in his voice made me nauseous. "It was a last-minute decision. We're already heading home." "Perfect. Because I have a surprise for you. I'm waiting here." I froze. He was at our house at that very moment. "A surprise?" "Yes, I brought that wine you like. I thought I'd spend the afternoon with you, talking about those documents Celeste left this morning." The officer made a signal for me to keep the conversation going. "How thoughtful, son. We'll be there in about half an hour." "Perfect. I'll be waiting." When I hung up, the officer was already communicating with his colleagues. "Suspect on location. Repeat, suspect on location. Maintain distance, but be ready." Turning to us, he explained, "We're going to let him enter. Watch what he does. If he tries to plant something, drugs, poison, anything, we'll have him on video. It would be irrefutable evidence." The plan made sense, but the idea of Jordan wandering through our house, possibly preparing some trap, terrified me. "What if he discovers the cameras?" Ernest asked. "Highly unlikely. They're button-sized and placed in strategic locations. Plus, we have agents positioned discreetly around the block." We went to a nearby cafe where we waited anxiously for news. With each passing minute, I imagined what Jordan might be doing in our house, preparing some trap, planting evidence against us, searching through our belongings. After 40 minutes that seemed like an eternity, the officer received a call. He listened attentively, making affirmative gestures with his head. "He left," he informed us upon hanging up, "and we have something interesting on the recordings." We returned quickly to the station, where they took us to a room with several monitors. Sergeant Matthews was already there, watching the recording of the cameras installed in our house. "Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield," he greeted us gravely, "I think you should see this." On the screen, we saw Jordan entering the kitchen with 2 plastic bags. He looked around, checking he was alone, and then began acting methodically. He took several medicine containers from the bags and placed them in our medicine cabinet, mixing them with ours. Then he opened a wine bottle, probably the surprise, he mentioned, and added some kind of white powder, mixing carefully before replacing the cork. Finally, he took a small electronic device from his pocket that we didn't recognize and installed it discreetly under the kitchen table. "Probably a microphone or camera," the sergeant explained. "My God," I murmured, covering my mouth with my hands. Seeing my own son on video, deliberately preparing what appeared to be our death, was indescribable pain. "Now we have more than enough evidence," said the sergeant. "I'm going to issue arrest warrants for Jordan Whitfield and Celeste Vaughn Whitfield immediately." "What did he put in our medicine cabinet?" Ernest asked, his voice trembling. "We need to analyze it, but from appearance, they're controlled medications, possibly in elevated doses. The substance he added to the wine will also be analyzed, but I'd bet on some type of potent sedative." The sergeant put his hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Whitfield, I know this is extremely painful, but you need to understand. Your son was actively attempting to kill you both today. If you had returned home and drunk that wine—" I couldn't contain my tears. The reality of the situation finally hit me with full force. These weren't just text messages or suspicious documents. It was my son in our kitchen deliberately poisoning drinks and medications he knew we would use. "What happens now?" Ernest asked, hugging me while I cried. "We're going to arrest them today," the sergeant replied. "With this evidence, there's no possibility of bail. You're safe now, but I still recommend you stay at the hotel for a few days until we resolve everything." As we were leaving the station trying to process everything that had happened, a police officer approached hurriedly. "Sergeant Matthews, we just received a call. Jordan and Celeste Whitfield are at the Whitfields' house right now. They seem agitated. They're looking for them." The sergeant reacted immediately. "Tactical team ready. We're going now." Turning to us, he explained, "They probably realize something's wrong, that you didn't come home as promised. We're going to arrest them right now. Can we go with you?" I asked, surprising myself. Part of me wanted to flee, never see Jordan or Celeste again. But another part, perhaps the stronger one, needed to be there, witness the end of this nightmare. The sergeant hesitated, but finally agreed. "You can stay in the police car at a safe distance, but you won't interfere in any way." On the way to our house, with my heart beating wildly in my chest, I wondered how I had reached this point. How my son, whom I had held in my arms as a baby, had transformed into this stranger capable of coldly planning my death. When we arrived, several police cars were already positioned discreetly around our house. Over the radio, we heard that Jordan and Celeste were still inside, apparently arguing about what to do. "They realize something's wrong," commented an officer. "They're trying to call the Whitfield cell phones repeatedly." Indeed, my phone had rung several times in recent minutes. Always Jordan. I ignored each call following police instructions. Sergeant Matthews personally coordinated the operation, speaking quietly over the radio with various agents positioned around the area. "Teams in position," he announced finally. "We're going in 1 minute." It was then that we saw movement. The front door opened and Jordan came out hurriedly, followed by Celeste. Both carried backpacks and seemed agitated, looking nervously around as they headed to the car parked on the street. "They're trying to flee," Ernest murmured. In an instant, several police officers emerged from their hiding places, surrounding the couple with weapons drawn. "Police! Stop! Hands where we can see them." I saw the shock on Jordan's face, the panic in Celeste's eyes. For a moment, Jordan seemed to consider running, but quickly realized he was surrounded. Slowly, both raised their hands. Within seconds, they were immobilized, handcuffed, and placed in separate vehicles. Everything was so quick and organized that it seemed unreal, like a movie scene. Sergeant Matthews approached our car. "It's done. Both are in custody, charged with attempted homicide, conspiracy, and various other crimes. We found the adulterated wine and the medications he planted. We're going to analyze everything." I looked through the police car window and saw my son being taken away, handcuffed, in the back seat of a patrol car. Our eyes met for a brief moment. I didn't see remorse in his eyes, only anger and perhaps surprise at being caught. In that moment, a strange sensation dominated me. It wasn't relief. It wasn't satisfied vengeance. It was just a deep emptiness, as if something fundamental had been torn from me. We returned to the station where we gave more formal statements. The police had found various incriminating items in Jordan and Celeste's backpacks. The original medications from the containers he had planted in our house, more doses of the powder he put in the wine, plane tickets abroad dated for the next day, and a considerable amount of cash. They were ready to flee, explained the sergeant. They probably realized something was wrong, that you hadn't returned home as promised. The plan was clearly to leave the poisoned wine, wait for you to consume it, and escape before the bodies were found. Ernest held my hand tightly as we listened. Each new detail was like a knife through my heart. You can see him if you want, the sergeant offered, after finishing the bureaucratic procedures. They're in separate cells awaiting transfer. Ernest shook his head. He wasn't ready yet, and I respected that, but something inside me needed to look into my son's eyes one last time. I want to see Jordan, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. The sergeant led me down a long, cold hallway to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. We'll bring him here. We'll be watching through the glass, and if you feel any discomfort, just raise your hand and we'll interrupt immediately. I nodded, sitting with my back straight and hands crossed on the table to hide their trembling. A few minutes later, the door opened and Jordan entered, handcuffed and escorted by a police officer. His face was pale, eyes red, hair disheveled. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a few hours. The officer made him sit across from me and left, remaining just outside the door. For almost a minute, we remained in silence, just looking at each other. Jordan was the first to speak. They set me up, he said with a low, bitter voice. This is all a big misunderstanding. Don't lie to me, I replied calmly. Not now. It's over. Jordan looked away, his jaw tense. What do you want me to say? I want to know why. Why your own father and me? What did we do to deserve this? Jordan let out a humorless laugh. You wouldn't understand. Try to explain it to me. I have all the time in the world now. He looked at me steadily again, something cold and calculating in his eyes that I had never noticed before. Money, Mom. It was always about money. You have so much. The house, the pensions, the investments, the insurance. And what do you do with all that? Nothing. Living your mediocre little lives, saving every penny as if you were going to live forever. I felt the blow of his words, but maintained my composure. And that justifies killing us? It was Celeste's idea at first, he admitted, as if that absolved him somehow. She works in finance. She realized how much you were worth and was tired of waiting. Why wait decades for an inheritance, she said, when we can start our real life now? And you agreed just like that so easily? He shrugged. It wasn't immediate, but she convinced me it would be better for everyone. You were already old. Eventually you'd start having health problems, suffer. It would be a favor. The coldness with which he spoke chilled my blood. This wasn't the son I knew or thought I knew. A favor, I repeated slowly. Poisoning your own parents would be a favor. It wouldn't be painful, he responded, as if that mattered. You'd simply fall asleep and not wake up. No suffering, like the wine you prepared today. Jordan remained silent for a moment. How did you find out? It was the messages on Celeste's phone, wasn't it? That idiot technician? Yes, it was the messages. But even without them, we would have figured it out eventually. You weren't as smart as you thought, son. He shifted in his chair, the handcuffs clinking. And now? Are you going to testify against your own son? Send me to prison? Were you going to make it look like an accident? No one would suffer. You'd die peacefully, and I'd finally have the life I deserve. The life you deserve, I repeated, letting the words float in the air between us. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to see beyond the anger, beyond the coldness, searching for any vestige of the child we raised. I found nothing. I don't recognize you, I said finally, my voice almost a whisper. The son we raised, whom we loved, whom we protected, where is he? I'm here, Jordan replied, a flash of emotion crossing his face. It's me. I just grew up. I just got tired of waiting my turn. I stood up slowly. You'll have a good lawyer. We'll pay for that. It's the last act as your parents. But don't expect anything more from us, Jordan. What you did has no going back. Mom, he called as I was already at the door. You don't understand. I just wanted a chance to really live. I turned one last time. We gave you every opportunity, son. Education, love, support. The choice of how to live was yours, and you chose this. I left the room feeling as if each step required enormous effort. In the hallway, I found Ernest waiting with red eyes, his face marked by tears he wasn't even trying to hide. What did he tell you? He asked quietly. The truth, finally, I replied. He did everything for money. Our death would just be a means for him to have the life he deserves. Ernest closed his eyes, a deep pain contorting his face. How didn't we realize? How didn't we see what he became? I had no answer. The same question tormented me. How could parents who were present at every important moment, who celebrated every achievement, who taught values and principles, have raised someone capable of coldly planning the murder of his own parents? We left the station in silence, heading to the hotel where we would spend the next few nights. On the way, Ernest spoke little, absorbed in his own thoughts. I knew he was reliving every moment of Jordan's upbringing, searching for the exact point where something went wrong. At the hotel, a simple but comfortable place downtown, we asked for a room with 2 single beds. Neither of us mentioned it, but we both knew we needed our own space that night. The pain was too personal, too deep to be shared, even after so many years together. I lay down exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. Images of Jordan as a child mixed with the vision of him putting poison in the wine, creating a waking nightmare from which I couldn't escape. When I finally fell asleep, it was a restless sleep, full of confusing dreams where I ran through endless hallways, pursued by shadows with my son's face. I woke startled by the sound of the phone. It was Sergeant Matthews. Mrs. Whitfield, excuse me for calling so early. We need you to come to the station as soon as possible. There's been a development in the case. The grave tone in his voice alarmed me. Did something happen? I prefer to explain in person. It's better if you come as soon as possible. I woke Ernest and told him about the call. Within 30 minutes, we were at the station being led directly to the sergeant's office. Matthews received us with a grave expression. Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, thank you for coming so quickly. I have complicated news. What happened? Ernest asked, his voice tense. Celeste Vaughn Whitfield requested to make a complete statement in exchange for reduced sentence. She's willing to testify against your son. I felt a knot in my throat. What did she say? According to her, the original plan was just to rob you, divert money from accounts, obtain powers to control assets. The idea of physically eliminating you emerged only in recent months, when Jordan realized you might discover the diversions. Ernest squeezed my hand tightly. She also claims, the sergeant continued, that Jordan was also planning to kill her after you were dead, and he had access to all the money. The revelation hit like a bomb. My son was planning to kill his own wife, I whispered. According to her, yes. She found messages from him with another woman, discussing how they'd split the money after the Celeste problem was resolved. I closed my eyes, trying to absorb this new layer of horror. It wasn't enough to plan our death. Jordan was willing to eliminate anyone who stood between him and the money. There's more, said Matthews, his tone even graver. We analyzed the powder he put in the wine. It's a mixture of potent sedatives and a substance called oleander. Extremely toxic, causes cardiac arrest. And we found evidence he had tried before. What do you mean? Ernest asked. Hair samples from you, Mrs. Whitfield, revealed traces of the same substance, probably administered in small doses to simulate natural health problems. That would explain the memory lapses he claimed you were having. They weren't lapses. They were symptoms of gradual poisoning. The room seemed to spin around me. I grabbed the edge of the table to stabilize myself as the cruel reality hit me. My son had already begun poisoning me slowly, methodically. How long? I managed to ask. It's hard to pinpoint exactly, but based on what the samples indicate, at least 3 months. 3 months. I mentally reviewed the small signs I had ignored, more frequent headaches, moments of dizziness, sleepless nights. I attributed everything to stress, to age, never imagining I was being slowly poisoned by my own son. "What about Mr. Ernest?" the sergeant asked, turning to my husband. "I feel fine," he replied, confused. "Still, we recommend toxicological tests. If Mrs. Whitfield was a target, it's possible he had begun acting against you too." We left the station even more affected than before. The idea that Jordan not only planned to kill us, but had already initiated the process, was unbearable. Every meal we shared in recent months, every cup of coffee he thoughtfully prepared, every medication he reminded me to take, all could have been part of his macabre plan. "Let's go to the hospital right now," Ernest insisted. "We need to check if there's permanent damage." At the hospital, we were seen with priority after explaining the situation. The doctors performed a battery of tests, collected blood and hair samples, and admitted us for 24-hour observation. The results, when they came, confirmed the suspicions. I had detectable levels of oleander in my system, though not enough to cause permanent damage. Ernest was clean, suggesting Jordan had focused on me first. Probably because as a woman with a history of health problems, I had breast cancer years ago, my death would seem less suspicious. "You were lucky, ma'am," explained the doctor. "The gradual poisoning was interrupted before it caused irreversible damage. With proper treatment and time, your body will completely eliminate the toxin." Lucky. It was a strange word to describe the situation. I was lucky because I discovered my son was poisoning me before he managed to kill me. If you're still here, leave a meaningful quote below. Let's see how many hearts felt this story. In the following days, the case gained proportions we never imagined. The story of the son who planned to murder his parents for inheritance attracted national media attention. Reporters surrounded the hotel where we were staying, called constantly, tried every way to get a statement from us. We declined all interviews, all appearances. Our pain was too deep, too personal to be transformed into public spectacle. Attorney Jefferson became our official spokesperson, managing all legal aspects and keeping the press at distance. She was the one who brought us the news that Jordan would be charged with attempted aggravated homicide with the aggravating factors of premeditated poisoning and base motive. If convicted, he would face decades in prison. 1 week after Jordan and Celeste's arrest, we finally felt safe enough to return home. The police had removed all surveillance equipment but installed an alarm system connected directly to the station, just as a precaution, as Sergeant Matthews said. Entering that house again was one of the hardest things I've done. Every room held memories, some beautiful, others now contaminated by the knowledge of what Jordan had become. In the living room, family photographs seemed to mock us. Jordan as a child smiling on his first day of school. Teenage Jordan proud with his swimming trophy. Adult Jordan at his wedding with Celeste. Moments that captured a life we now knew had been, at least partly, an illusion. Ernest walked slowly through the house, touching objects, looking at photographs, as if trying to reconcile the happy past with the devastating present. "We need to move," he said finally. "I can't live here knowing what happened in this kitchen, in this house," I agreed silently. The house, which had been our refuge for decades, was now impregnated with betrayal and danger. That night, lying in our bed, holding hands in the darkness, Ernest expressed the thought that was tormenting me. Will we ever understand what happened? How our son transformed into this? "I don't know," I replied honestly. "Maybe some things have no explanation. Maybe some people simply choose the wrong path, regardless of how they were raised." We talked to him, Mara, so many times about honesty, about hard work, about family. How wasn't that enough? Maybe for some people nothing is enough. Maybe the emptiness inside them can never be filled. We remained silent for a long time, each absorbed in our own thoughts. Finally, Ernest spoke again. "What do we do now? How do we move forward after this?" It was the question I had been asking myself. How do you rebuild a life when the very foundations have been destroyed? How do you trust again when betrayal came from the one you loved most? "One day at a time," I replied, squeezing his hand. "We start over somewhere else, supporting each other. In the following weeks, we put the house up for sale, started the process of searching for a new home, and tried somehow to rebuild a sense of normalcy. We found a small apartment downtown, completely different from the spacious house where we raised Jordan, and slowly began transferring only items that didn't bring painful memories. Meanwhile, the judicial case moved forward. Celeste reached an agreement with the prosecution, accepting to testify against Jordan in exchange for a reduced sentence. Jordan, on the other hand, remained firm in denying the more serious accusations, claiming everything was more than a family misunderstanding and that the evidence had been manipulated. 2 years after discovering the conspiracy against our lives, Ernest and I celebrated our 45th wedding anniversary. We decided not to do anything grand, just a quiet dinner at home with the few friends who stood by us during the entire storm. Thank you for listening all the way. Maybe the story ended, but there are still so many feelings to share. Leave a few words from your heart in the comments. Who knows? Maybe the next story begins with you.